Warning, the following video contains major spoilers for Alan Wake 1 and minor spoilers for Alan Wake 2. If you're not finished the entire Alan Wake series, view at your own risk. Hello everyone, and I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing this during Telltale games, Transformers, and more. So before I get started with this video, first off, Happy New Year to all of you for making it to 2024. We've just made it through the first week of 2024, and I hope you guys are really excited to see what I've got cooking for this year with my YouTube channel. I'll be making a bigger, proper channel update video probably later on in this month. Along with that, though, for those of you who are still waiting on my Transformers Earthspark Season 1 review video essay, that will still hopefully be coming out by the end of this month. I'm working very hard on the script. I'm almost 2/3 of the way done with the script, and then it'll get to just editing and recording it all together. And I've got a lot of cool people in the Transformers community helping out with this video, so I hope you're excited to see who I managed to get working with for this video. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Transformers, we're here to talk about Dead by Daylight, which is, again, one of my favorite video games of all time, in case you haven't seen my last few videos covering the Chucky DLC just came out. Well, anyway, I'm here to talk about another Dead by Daylight DLC that'll be coming out very, very soon, in about 2 days from now, actually. Presumably, I should say. Take this with a grain of salt, because we don't know this for sure. Anyway, the rumor is that this Tuesday, on January 9th, which is in 2 days, we'll be getting the PTB for the mid-chapter 30 update for Dead by Daylight, aka Paragraph 6. So, for those of you who are newer to Dead by Daylight, paragraphs are essentially mini chapters that Dead Behavior releases to sort of be in between certain chapters and to tide over players. These usually revolve around, either survivor-only DLCs, where, in the example in the past, we've had Bill from Left 4 Dead was the very first paragraph. We got Ash, Masters of the Evil Dead. The two last paragraphs we had are probably the biggest ones in DBD's history. Those were Paragraph 4, Hour of the Witch, which gave us our first ever original survivor that's solo, who was Michaela Reed, and she brought the Boon Totem perks with her, which was hugely changed up the game. And then, most recently, last year, we got Paragraph 5, Nicolas Cage, which brought Nicolas Cage, of course, to Dead by Daylight, and he was such fun to have. Totally changed DBD in terms of having interactive survivors, having perks that were absolutely insane. It was such a really good time having Nicolas Cage in DBD. But now we've got another Survivor-exclusive chapter, aka Paragraph, coming out within the next few days, at least on the PTB, presumably. Though we have no idea what to expect from it. It could be a DBD original Survivor, or it could be a licensed Survivor. We just don't know which one yet. But my money is, I'm going to lean more towards a licensed Survivor. So, who do I think the licensed Survivor is going to be for DBD Paragraph 6? Well, if you read the title of this video, it's clear enough. I think the Survivor, it would be perfect timing too, considering the game just came out a few months ago. I believe the Paragraph 6 Survivor for Dead by Daylight is going to be none other than Alan Wake. So, for starters, Alan Wake is legit one of my favorite games series of all time. I love Remedy's work on not just Alan Wake and Alan Wake 2, which I just played through the first time last month, but I just love all Remedy's games like Quantum Break, Control, and so on, Max Payne. And it'd be so awesome to have Alan Wake, because he fits the world of Dead by Daylight so well. So, what I'm going to be talking about in this video is why I believe Alan Wake deserves to be in Dead by Daylight as a survivor, and why he works better as a survivor-only chapter instead of just a survivor and a killer. And then we're going to go over other stuff, like what his bio would be like, what his perks would be, considering that he'd be coming in as a survivor by himself. He'd have some pretty crazy perks to make him stand out from other survivors. What his cosmetics would be, and so on. So if you're excited to talk about this, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So for those of you who just turning in to have no idea what Alan Wake is, let me just do a little summary for you. Alan Wake is essentially a horror survival / action game series by Remedy Entertainment, the creators of other games you might know, such as Max Payne, Quantum Break, and Control. And the Alan Wake specifically revolves around a writer of the same name, Alan Wake, who, after suffering a really bad writer's block, goes with his wife to this idyllic Pacific Northwest town of Bright Falls, Washington to try and get some inspiration back. One event leads to another, though, and accidentally Alan ends up with awakening a evil entity living within the lake of the town called Dark Presence, which is very similar to the entity, actually, when you think about it. Anyway, the Dark Presence feeds off of works of art created in the town of Bright Falls. So with Alan writing his story, his horror story comes to life, essentially. That's a really gross simplification of the plot of the game, though. And the Dark Presence ends up essentially kidnapping his wife. And so the whole first game is about him trying to go fight against this Dark Presence, working with the people of Bright Falls to save his wife. And it's a very, very fun game with incredible story all around. Also, as I mentioned at the start of this video will feature some major spoilers for Alan Wake 1, but also minor spoilers for Alan Wake 2. So those of you who don't want to be spoiled on either game, be sure to click off the video right now. So I'm just gonna, because I'm going to go ahead and talk about the ending of Alan Wake 1 and Alan Wake 2 in general. So, long story short though, at the end of Alan Wake 1, Alan does manage to defeat the Dark Presence and save his wife, but at a cost. And that cost, essentially, he has to take her place as a Dark Place's prisoner, essentially. So he gets stuck under the lake, in this little cabin, trying to figure out a way to break out. And throughout the whole ending of the game, we see that he's going to start writing a new story that will hopefully break him out of the Dark Place. And that fast forwards us 13 years later to when Alan Wake 2 is finally released this year, and the story of Alan Wake 2 is just absolutely phenomenal, and I love that the story actually progresses in real time, that Alan Wake 2 came out 13 years after Alan Wake 1, and the game actually takes place 13 years later after Alan Wake 1, so Alan was trapped in the Dark Place for 13 years, and now Alan Wake 2 is all about him trying to escape after those 13 years, and it's just so good how, Alan Wake's story is throughout the whole, both games, and even some other games like Control, for instance. So for those who don't know, Remedy likes to try and merge all of their games together into one shared universe, kind of like an MCU type deal going on here. So before Alan Wake 2 came out, Remedy released this other game called Control that had a few Easter eggs to Alan Wake 1, and it all culminated in a DLC for Control that basically crossed the two games over and acted sort of a prequel to Alan Wake 2, which I absolutely loved that DLC, but we're talking about Alan Wake here, not Control. So, but anyway, Alan Wake has huge potential for Dead by Daylight. I think he, as a survivor, would fit perfectly into with other survivors like Leon, Jill, Ripley, and so on, and Tap. He would just fit perfectly. So, I'm gonna go ahead and read off first a little bio I wrote for Alan Wake to explain how he would get into Dead by Daylight. And then we'll go ahead and talk about what his potential perks could be and how, as basically a survivor-only chapter, his perks would be unique enough to warrant him coming in as a survivor-only DLC. So to start things off, my proposed idea for an Alan Wake survivor chapter in Dead by Daylight, let's go ahead and first off read what I have written for a proposed bio for Alan Wake if he was to come into DBD. Ever since he was a child, Alan Wake's imagination had been his greatest strength and weakness. Stories, characters, and other ideas led him to become one of the world's most prolific crime and thriller writers through his detective series, Alex Casey. After publishing the final entry in the series, though, Alan was lost. Writer's block hit him hard, tormenting him for months as to what to write next. He wanted to write something new, something different, but the inspiration never came. The struggle took a toll on his marriage with his wife, Alice, who grew concerned for his well-being. That's what led her to schedule an appointment with a renowned doctor in the isolated town of Bright Falls, Washington. She and Alan left their high-rise apartment in New York City later that winter, though Alice kept their vacation's true intention a secret. Once they arrived at their cabin, Alan learned the truth and was furious. He stormed out of the cabin, but not before a sudden darkness overcame him and the rest of the town. Alan rushed back inside the cabin, hearing Alice's screams for help. Gazing over the cabin's balcony, he saw her sink into the cold, dark lake surrounding the cabin, pulled down by that same dark presence. Alan learned at this point that the town of Bright Falls held a special power, Cauldron Lake specifically. A powerful, dark being dwelled within its depths, in an alternate reality called the Dark Place. It feasted on works of art. Songs, paintings, films, even writing. Art created near the lake came to life, but in a twisted, demented way. Such was the case with Alan Wake, who was coerced by a dark presence to write a horror story in order to claim dominion over the world. The same horror story that had plagued Alan's mind for months. With help from other residents in Bright Falls, though, he managed to beat back the dark presence, diving deep into Cauldron Lake to save Alice from it. But it was a Pyrrhic victory. Though he had succeeded in freeing his wife, Alan offered himself up as a new prisoner for the Dark Place. A horror story cannot have a perfectly happy ending, after all. Despite the seemingly hopeless situation, Alan was determined to free himself as well one day. He began working on another story, one that would surely set him free. He could control reality with his writing. No matter how long it would take, the day would come when he would be free. But time was impossible to track in the Dark Place. As the hours passed, Alan's sense of mind slowly fractured, driving him mad. Had it been days? Weeks? Years? He was getting desperate. It was becoming impossible to write. He stared at the empty piece of paper in his typewriter, hands clutching fistfuls of his own hair in frustration. He was never going to escape. The dark place would be his prison and his tomb. Then, a voice whispered in his ear. A whisper of inspiration. The voice told him to write a new story, an even darker story, but one where salvation could potentially be reached. Was this the dark presence simply toying with him? Giving him false hope, finding an even more horrifying way to torture him? It didn't matter. Alan was desperate. His fingers frantically danced over the typewriter's keyboard, punching each word into the paper. This was a different horror story. A story of shifting realms, an entity devouring the collective experiences of creatures and people from across the world. No, not world. Worlds. Realities. All for a cosmic buffet where only a lucky chosen few would be granted freedom. As Alan finished the manuscript, the whispers grew louder, turning to roars. Like a howling wind, black fog crashed through the cabin windows. But this was not the dark presence. It was even darker, stronger. Alan welcomed the thick, spidery tendrils, squeezing him tightly as he laughed maniacally. The darkness engulfed him completely soon after, leaving only his empty chair and a title page of a finished manuscript on his desk. Death is Not an Escape, by Alan Wake. So, for layman's terms, I essentially decided to have Alan be taken in between the events of Alan Wake 1 and 2. I would say, based on the ending of Alan Wake 2, the ending of that could perfectly tie in to why he gets taken into Dead by Daylight, but I don't think Behavior wants to go ahead and spoil the end of Alan Wake 2, considering the game's only like a few months old at this point. So to have it take place in between the events of Alan Wake 1 and 2, I think, fits a lot more, in my opinion. But with that out of the way, though, let's go ahead now and talk about what outfits I think are But with that out of the way, let's go ahead now and talk about what kind of perks Alan Wake would bring with him into Dead by Daylight. So with most paragraphs in Dead by Daylight, the survivors' perks that they come with usually have very crazy perks because of the fact that since there's no killer or map for that survivor to bounce off of, all the survivor really has going for them are the perks, and of course, their cosmetics and appearances and all that. With Michaela, she came in so well, received so positive. Not only is she such a popular character in terms of appearance-wise, but her perks with all the Boon Totem perks were absolutely incredible to have back when they first came out. Circle of Healing and Shadow Step were incredible perks, at least at launch. Circle of Healing has been nerfed quite a bit, but Shadow Step I still see being used quite a bit. And then Clairvoyance is sort of but I can see it being a niche perk. But mostly just people love Michaela. They love her design and all that, and that's why she worked so well as a solo survivor DLC. Then with Nicolas Cage, of course, he's Nicolas Cage, so of course people are going to love him. But also, he was just so crazy with how he came in. Perks like Dramaturgy, Scene Partner, and Plot Twist all were very unique and very wild. It's something we've never seen Dead by Daylight do before, just these random, silly perks. And people liked that. They also liked how much voice Nicolas Cage had. The fact that they actually got Nicolas Cage to voice himself in Dead by Daylight, doing all kinds of crazy stuff like screaming on hooks, taunting the killer as he's running away, even like when opening the gates, having voice lines in-game is something we never saw a survivor have before in Dead by Daylight, and that really helped with sales for Nicolas Cage when it came out. So, what kind of gimmick would Alan Wake bring with him since he's got no killer to bounce off him? So, for me, I feel like the best case with Alan's perks is that they should all focus on light and changing the environment of the trial around him, because of course that's very true to what Alan Wake does in his games. It's all about light versus darkness, rewriting reality to what you want it to be. So with that, let's go ahead and go over Alan's 3 perks that I have in mind for him. For the first of Alan's 3 perks, I was thinking about giving Alan a new item that could basically change the way the game is played, essentially. So, it's very similarly to actually how Leon sort of changed the game when he came in with his flashbang perk. I think the best way to incorporate a new item for Alan to bring in is a very key item in the game of Alan Wake, and that would be none other than a flare. So the way I expect a flare perk to work in Dead by Daylight is very similar actually to how Leon's flashbang perk works. So basically how it would work is after repairing a generator for like about maybe 30% of it, you'll fill up the flare perk, and then once it's filled up, you go into a locker, and once you're in a locker, you press E, and now will craft a flare in your hand, making it your main item if you already have an item, or just be an item if you already have one. Just like the flashbangs with Leon, you can drop the flares and let other survivors pick them up and so on. But how the flare works is what really makes it shine. I think it'll be such a cool way to use it. So in Dead by Daylight, I imagine flares working sort of like a smaller, a shorter range, but also more accurate, or more wider flashlight. So the way it would work is once you have the flare in your hand, you right-click, like, or do whatever your button is to activate, like, a flashlight. Instead of you throw a flare. If you hold mouse, the right-click, or whatever your item activation button is, your character will hold up the flare, like, crack open the flare, and then hold it up. And then when you're holding the flare, you move as fast as you would if you're aiming a flashlight, essentially. And then if you let go of the flare, your character will drop it at their feet like a flashbang or firecracker. But otherwise, if you just keep holding it, you move with the flare. And so how the flare would work is, it's got about half the range, let's say, of a normal flashlight. But if a killer just walks within that range, whether it be from behind you, above you, or behind you, in front of you, to either side of you, regardless of whatever direction the killer is facing, if they step in your range with the flare active, or in the range of a flare that's on the ground, they will become blinded after 2 seconds. I think that would be or maybe 1.5 seconds, either 1 second or 1.5 seconds, and then the killer gets blinded. To me, I think the point of the flare perk would be that it would basically be sort of an easier, beginner-friendly way of using flashlights. We all love doing flashlight saves, but a lot of people have trouble doing them, so I think with a flare, that would be it would be easier, but the fact that it's shorter distance than a flashlight makes it harder to use than, let's say, a flashlight. Also, with a flare, you can't hold it like you can a flashlight. You use it once, and then that's it. You're done. It can only be used for a bit, and then you have to, in order to get it again, you have to repair a generator at least 30%. So you can't just stockpile a bunch of flares, or if you do, it's going to take a while. You can't just camp flares. You're not going to spam them like you would a flashlight, let's say. To me, I think this is a great thing to use, as it would be not only a beginner-friendly way to teach survivors how to use flashlights, and if they struggle with that, it also just makes flashlight saves a lot easier to do as well. I think that would be really, really cool to have as a brand new item that's sort of, it's like a cross between a flashbang and a flashlight. So I really think that would be a cool way to incorporate flares into Dead by Daylight. Keeping on with the theme of light, we're going to move on to Alan's second perk, the idea that I have. This one will just be called Champion of Light, in my opinion. So, in the Alan Wake games, light is a very prominent theme and feature of the games, where at least in the first Alan Wake game, they kind of nerfed in Alan Wake 2 because they have actual healing items, but in Alan Wake 1 especially, you healed if you stood under a flashlight, under a street light, or a lamp post. So how can we take the properties of healing light and put that in Dead by Daylight? That's where I think the perk Champion of Light would come in. So the way this perk would work, in my opinion, is essentially if either whoever has the Champion of Light perk, if they shine a flashlight on an injured survivor for about, let's say, 7 to 10 seconds, then the survivor will become instantly healed 1 health state. So if they're on the ground, shine a flashlight on them for like 10 seconds, and it would heal them back up to injured. If they're injured already, shine a flashlight on them, you'll heal them up to healthy, and so on. Alternatively, if you have a flare, you can just hold the flare up for 5 seconds with a flare perk, and that will heal them. Or, if you have a flashbang or a firecracker, you throw those down, and after it explodes, it will instantly heal someone. Also, if you have Champion of Light, and if you throw down a flashbang or firecracker at your own feet, it would blind you, yes, but it would also heal you as well. So I think that's a cool way to sort of make chases more interesting, where let's say you're injured, you're running away with a flashbang that you got by using a flashbang perk, and the killer's chasing you. You throw it on a pallet to block the killer off, and while they're breaking the pallet, you have Champion of Light and flashbang. You throw the flashbang down your feet while you're injured. The flashbang goes off, blinding you and maybe the killer as well, but because of Champion of Light, you'll be healed as well. Some people might say this is a bit of an overpowered perk. It's like, oh, that just basically encourages players to run flashbang and firecrackers more often, so people will be spamming them all the time. Which, to be fair, yes, I can understand that, but also, in the case of flashbang, you do have to repair a generator at least 33% to get a flashbang, and you can only use it once. And then with flashlights and flares, it takes 10 seconds. It would take 10 seconds of the flashlight charge to heal someone. So it's sort of, you're using a flashlight either to heal someone or blind the killer. So in my opinion, I think that's a good trade-off, where you want to use light to heal instead of light to blind. And it really ties back into Alan Wake's whole thing about light healing you throughout the games, which I really, really like. Now, for Alan's final perk, I want to go a little unorthodox with it, but sort of fits in with his themes. So in the Alan Wake game, specifically towards the end of Alan Wake 1 and throughout the entirety of Alan Wake 2, Alan has the ability to rewrite reality around him with his writing. So he can change like how certain areas look and all that, will certain objects into existence just with his writing and so on. So I don't really have a name for this perk necessarily. I'm thinking maybe something like Writer's Block or something like that. But anyway, here's how I imagine the perk would work. After repairing a generator for about 45 to 50%, the perk will activate. And then if you go over to where a pallet or wall was broken, you can use up your perk's charge to rebuild that pallet or wall. Now, I've seen a lot of people try to find a way to get like a rebuild pallet and wall perk into Dead by Daylight. I think this would be perfect for Alan because his whole thing's about rewriting reality. What better way for him to rewrite reality in Dead by Daylight than by having him literally rewrite a pallet or wall that was broken and bring it back, essentially. And of course, since it would take you 45 to 50% of a generator to repair that pallet or wall, that way you can't just spam it constantly, like break pallets, rebuild them. But also gives potential for more synergy with stuff like, let's say, Any Means Necessary, or Windows Opportunity, where maybe Windows, they could buff Windows and show you the aura of where broken pallets or walls are. Maybe that would be something that Writer's Block does as part of its perk. It shows you the aura of any broken pallets or walls. I think that would just be a really good way, and with all these 3 perks, it would make Alan Wake a very welcome addition to Dead by Daylight. So we've covered Alan Wake's potential bio for Dead by Daylight, as well as what perks I think he would bring in a survivor-only chapter that would make him feel very unique and deserving of being a paragraph survivor as opposed to just being a survivor packaged in with a killer and staged like a normal chapter. So let's go ahead now and talk about what kind of cosmetics Alan Wake would bring into Dead by Daylight. So since Alan Wake 2 is on everyone's mind, as much as I'm not the biggest fan of his design, I would have to say his default look would probably be his Alan Wake 2 design with the brown plaid suit and jacket combo. Well, it's not saying I hate this design for Alan Wake. It's definitely, I like it, but it's not one of my favorite designs for Alan Wake if I had to pick between that and something else. Other than that, obviously, you have to go through store cosmetics. I would love to see his Alan Wake 1 design as an alternate skin with the more, Henley jacket, or with the hoodie and jeans instead. That's like one of my favorite looks for Alan. I think would absolutely be a good one. On top of that, maybe also throw in his American Nightmare outfit from the American Nightmare spin-off game, where he had the plaid button-down t-shirt open with the undershirt underneath and the jeans. I really liked his outfit in American Nightmare, which he does wear a bit in Alan Wake 2 as well as a little Easter egg. Other than that, the only other things I think of is if Remedy wants to, or Behavior wants to cut really deep, they could also give us his prototype design from the original 2005 version of Alan Wake 1, where he had the green, like, raincoat with the red scarf and glasses wrapped around his neck. That was, like, a look that I really liked from him as well. Or they could even give us his original design that was going to be in the original version of Alan Wake 2, where he had the black raincoat with the green sweater underneath with the jeans, too. But considering that was from a canceled version of Alan Wake 2, I'm not sure if that one would really, fit in with Dead by Daylight. What I really would like to see, though, is, as a reference to both Alan Wake's American Nightmare and Alan Wake 2, is if we got a skin that turns him into Mr. Scratch, or just gives him Mr. Scratch's outfit. So for any of you who don't know, at the end of Alan Wake 1, it's revealed that Alan gets a dark doppelganger of himself called Mr. Scratch, and Mr. Scratch is essentially the main antagonist of Alan Wake 2. And I would love if we got Mr. Scratch's outfit as a skin for Alan in Dead by Daylight, specifically his Alan Wake 2 design, where he's got the slicked back hair, the bloody biker jacket and jeans. That would be an absolutely perfect outfit or Mr. Scratch themed outfit for Alan. And then finally, if we had to, talk about, like, other skins, well, that's really all the main skins Alan could get. I would really like to see him get a legendary skin that turns him into Saga Anderson, who is the second main character of Alan Wake 2 alongside Alan. I absolutely loved playing through Saga's story in Alan Wake 2. She brought such a cool new shift, like, in narrative to the story of Alan Wake, and I think having her in as a legendary skin for Alan would be absolutely perfect. Of course, if they were to make Saga into a legendary skin for him, they would just go with her main design from Alan Wake 2 with the FBI jacket and the red, ugly sweater underneath it with the jeans. That would just be perfect for Saga. I think she'd fit in perfectly with, let's say, Leon and Tap and Rebecca. Oh, it'd be so cool. Imagine playing a game where you have Alan Wake, Saga, Chris Redfield, and, like, Ellen Ripley all together. Oh, that would be so good. I just really would love to see Alan Dead by Daylight just so that we can get him in with all these cosmetics, including Saga as a legendary skin for him. Alright, and that is my essential layout proposed idea for how I believe Alan Wake could fit in as the Paragraph 6 survivor for Dead by Daylight. Or I'm not even sure if it will be Alan Wake or some other licensed survivor, maybe even a DBD original survivor. We'll find out soon, hopefully on January 9th, when the PTB for Paragraph 6 is scheduled to go live, presumably. So are you guys excited for Paragraph 6 of Dead by Daylight and hope that the survivor will be Alan Wake 2? If you are, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe, and I will see you guys later.